the implication is that we were somehow holding back information, when in fact we were simply saying what we thought was right. And when elements of that turned out not to be true, we were the first people to say so. It was based on what we knew at the time.
Why were you holding back this information? Why was this email not turned over to the Congress? Why was it not released when you released all the other emails? This is directly relevant. Why did you hold it back?
John, again.
Why did it take a court case for you to release this?
John, I can say it again and again, and I know you can keep asking again and again. This document was not about Benghazi.
All right, folks, there you go. That's Jay Carney yesterday. We're joined by Senator Rand Paul, of course. Hello, Senator.
Glad to be with you.
Well, always good to talk to you. It's been a long time. First of all, the follow-up today, Jay Carney pressed again, to their credit, by the media at the press briefing, and he said that this is just another example of the Republicans politicizing the tragedy of Benghazi, which they've been doing from the beginning. Your take on where we are with that now?
Well, I think it's actually completely the opposite. The Democrats have been politicizing Benghazi because they tried to make it about some kind of talking points. They tried to make it about a movie or a protest that really no one on the ground in Benghazi said that that was true. In fact, everyone in Benghazi, to a person, said immediately that there were no signs of a protest, no signs of activity related to a movie, and that this was a coordinated terrorist attack on the compound. So really, from the very beginning, they have not been telling the truth. They've been advising their people, the White House, political people, advising their spokesman to, I guess, really, I think, fabricate a story and try to divert attention from the terrorism involved.
All right, and so what would you suggest? Senator Graham was on with us earlier, and he says select committee and get these people like Rhodes, who wrote that email that was discovered yesterday, and others to testify all before that one committee.
Well, I think they do need to testify, whether it's a select committee or whether it's before Chairman Iss's committee. They need to be brought to task on this, and we need some answers. I think the questions need to rise all the way to the top, though. I'd like to know, was Hillary Clinton involved with telling Colonel Gibson not to send reinforcements? There were 4 people, special ops guys, trying to get on a Libyan plane that evening to go help those under attack. And they were told by someone to stand down, to not go. And I'd like to know whether Hillary Clinton was part of the process. Was she in the discussions? So I think really the only way we get to the truth of the matter is to have her come back and testify.
Yeah, and retired Brigadier General Robert Lovell testified today. He was the intelligence director at AFRICOM at the time of the attack. He said that we should have tried to help the Americans. He also said in no way, right? He said right from the beginning they knew it was the offshoot of Al-Qaeda, that a video never ever entered into anybody's mind.
Right. So this isn't just public relations gone awry. This is people purposely distorting and telling untruths. This is someone saying from the White House, a political person saying to Ambassador Rice when she goes on television, make sure you emphasize that this is about the movie. And yet no one on the ground, not one person, not one scintilla of intelligence came out from Benghazi associating this with the movie. People in Washington were doing this, but it seems as if, or it appears as if, during an election, that campaign concerns seem to have more concern than the truth did.
All right, let me ask you, sir, you're introducing legislation, which I applaud you for, to cut off aid to the Palestinian government since it's now unifying with Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. What's the status of that, and what do you believe the future of that is?
This afternoon, I will be asking the Senate to pass by unanimous consent a bill that would make aid to the Palestinian Authority contingent on them recognizing Israel. So it would cut it off if they don't recognize Israel. And the reason why this is important is you now have Fatah.
Excuse me, as a Jewish state, sir, or when you say recognize Israel?
It's both.
Okay.
It's both,
okay.
As well as recognize all diplomatic agreements that have been made previously, as well as renounce terrorism and agree to a ceasefire. And I think that this is really, if we're going to send money to people in the Middle East who hate our ally of Israel, I think that the money ought to be contingent upon behavior. And I can't see sending it to Hamas. Hamas has in their original charter the destruction of Israel as one of their goals. So how we would ever conceive of American money going to a government that has Hamas as part of it without Hamas agreeing to end hostilities and to recognize Israel, I just can't see how we could conceive of sending American money to a group like that. And I think the American people are with me on this. I'm getting pushback from the establishment up here. They think foreign aid should flow no matter what you do.
Who's pushing back? For instance, who's pushing back on this?
Ironically, the group AIPAC is pushing this bill. And this is, to me, very troubling because I think if I were to speak to the 10,000 folks who come up here in support of AIPAC, the vast majority of them would support my bill, and yet the political establishment up here thinks, oh, we're going to stop this because we've always given foreign aid to the Palestinians, and we frankly don't care what their behavior is. And I think the American people, if they knew that, would be very, very upset and think, you know what, those people are no longer lobbying in favor of America and Israel if they're not willing to put restrictions on aid to Palestinians.
That is outrageous. I can't even imagine that. And let me ask you this. John Kerry, of course, said that if Israel doesn't acquiesce to his two-state solution, they'll become an apartheid state. Caroline Glick said of that, well, one of the other things he said at that meeting, which didn't get a lot of publicity, was the Palestinian police will turn their guns on Israelis as well. And Caroline Glick said, just based on that statement, we should cut off the aid that goes to training the Palestinian police and security forces. We pay for it, we train them, and if he's now threatening that they're going to turn their guns on Israel because there's no peace process, then maybe we should cut off that aid too. Would this bill encompass that aid?
Yes, it would encompass all American aid to the Palestinian Authority regardless of what it's used for, and it would make it contingent upon, we have about 5 items, including primary among those, that Palestinian Authority and Hamas recognize the State of Israel. And I think that's the starting point. That's not the ending point.
Right.
That's the beginning of the peace process. But how can we have a peace process if you have a unified government with Hamas and Fatah, with Hamas having as their stated goal the destruction of Israel?
I know you got to go. A couple more. I know I'm not going to get you to say you're running for president. That's going to happen after the November elections. I understand that. But you did pretty good in Maine. You addressed their convention. You won the straw poll. You met with some of Romney's 2012 campaign people in I believe you were there with Susan Collins. And so I mean you're rolling along. No?
Well, I want to be part of making the Republican Party big enough that we're the dominant party, that our ideas win elections, and that we can start to grow this country again. We have so much pent-up capital in this country and ability to create jobs, but it's all afraid of its government now, or it's going overseas. You got Pfizer and other companies thinking about going overseas because the taxes are too high here. It's a sad state of affairs when we say, you know what, Canada has a lower corporate income tax. Canada has half the corporate income tax we have in America. That's a sad state of affairs.
Do me one favor, though, and if you run, don't use the whole Romney team, please. Use people who are a little more savvy and a little more willing to take on the media and the left and not run away from issues. And I'm sure you'll find that out. One final question: this proposed Comcast merger with Time Warner. Comcast owns NBC, MSNBC. You know the political bent there. Do you have any opinions on that? Are you afraid? A lot of conservatives feel that if Comcast and Time Warner merge, it's going to be a negative overall on the ability of conservative voices to be heard in the future going forward on TV, and a domination, if you will, a monopoly for Comcast and Time Warner?
I think one of the good things about the Internet coming on board is there's such a diversity of opinion and so many places to get opinion that I think all of the old-fashioned rules on mergers and acquisitions in media really have become outdated because there's so much competition. There's an intense amount of competition, so many places to look for a viewpoint that you're interested in that I'm just not much on having the government get involved in these mergers. Most of the time the government gets involved because one other competitor doesn't like it, and that competitor is usually an enormous competitor and a multi-million or billion-dollar company also. So I think for the most part, no, I would let mergers occur. All
right. Thank you so much, Senator. I know you got to run to the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senator Rand Paul, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very interesting. And bravo to him. AIPAC is pushing back? AIPAC is pushing back on cutting off aid to a Palestinian government that includes Hamas? We got to get AIPAC on the phone because that is mind-boggling ladies and gentlemen. And give credit to Rand Paul. He's come under criticism, because he's because his father's an isolationist and he's a libertarian. And on foreign policy, he does believe in doing away with a lot of foreign aid. But I think he's showing support for Israel here. That certainly I haven't seen anything legislatively from anybody on the other side, on the Democrat side, to cut off the aid to the Palestinians if this unity government goes through. We're coming back. The panel on the Steve Malzberg Show.